I actually think, and I could be wrong about this, but any pastors who are listening, I think this area of the country of Nashville, Tennessee, is one of the hardest areas of ministry to work in a church. I think this is a dirty word in church. It shouldn't be. Competition.
Yeah.
Is off the charts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And in fact, I will listen to, I'll go to conferences, I'll go to all different, and there'll be all the latest, here's the things you can do. And I'll go, it doesn't apply to the Nashville context. Yeah. And I just think it's a much bigger challenge than any other place I've been.
Hey, what's your problem? You have business problems? We have business solutions.
Yeah, occasionally.
Well, maybe.
Perhaps.
Life is a fight.
Oh, yeah.
In business, every day is a fight.
I ain't kidding.
So, hey, what's your problem?
Yes, as always, thank you, John David Wells, the big old voice guy for the show. He's out of Dallas. Check him out at the Wells Report on Facebook. He's got an electrical year coming up because of it's election season. An electric election season coming up. Try saying that 5 times fast. This is the What's Your Problem podcast, where we talk to Middle Tennessee business owners and professionals about the one thing, because it's always something. That's the impetus of this podcast. Someone told me one time, hey man, it's always something. And as soon as he said it to me, I was like, okay, I get it. I feel relieved. That's kind of what we talk about. Well, that and a whole bunch of other stuff. This is a video and audio podcast. Check us out at whatsyourproblempodcast.com. This year's big, hairy, audacious goal, and it looks like going into next year, probably the year after, 10,000 average downloads per episode on an annualized basis. So if you could help us out, share, subscribe, rate, review, all the things are right there at whatsyourproblempodcast.com. I am your host, Jim McCarthy, with Jim McCarthy Voiceovers and it'syourshow.co, a very company that produces podcasts like this. So if you want something like this, hit us up. That's where we're going to be. And today, Mr. Josh Huisman.
That's me.
Interesting spelling, but it's kind of throws you off.
It is, for sure.
You spend a lot of time trying telling people how to pronounce your last name.
You know what? I think at a young age, I stopped trying to correct people. I knew my family and I were heavily involved in baseball, so my brothers and I would always have our names pronounced wrong when they would do the lineups and all that. And I don't even correct people. Man, you could say whatever you want to say, but if they ask me, I'll go, it's like the trophy, Huisman Trophy.
Huisman, yeah, but it's Huis.
Yeah.
Instead of Heis.
I know.
Right?
I had a band one time that I just named it, I just spelled it with the E. Yeah. My dad goes, you can't do that. That's not us, man. I was like, yeah, but I don't want to answer the question.
Like that movie, That Thing You Do. You ever see that with Tom Hanks?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The Oneaters. Because it was spelled one O-N-E instead of one. The pun was it was the Wonders, but they wanted the word as the number one in the name.
It reminds me of, so I'm sure we'll get into this. I'm a pastor as well, and there's a character in the Bible named Onesimus, and some call him Onesimus, and some call him Onesimus.
Really?
So that goes along the line with what you're talking about.
Yeah,
the Wonders.
Sense.
The Oneaters.
The Oneaters.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into all things, what you have a podcast.
Yeah.
You do devotions. You're a pastor here in the Middle Tennessee area. We're going to do the Dad Joke Challenge.
All right.
Dad Joke Challenge is brought to you by Trade Bank of Nashville. And the person who heads that up is Mr. Ed Fox, the Aussie with the Mossy. I was going to try and, get the mostest in there, but it's not working, so I'm not going to do it. I tried horribly and, crashed and burned. Trade Bank is a organization that if you want to tap into an alternative economy, alternative economy.
Yeah.
For your business, maybe you got some goods and services, things have slowed down for you. Trade Bank is a good option. Also plugs you into all other businesses that do trade as well. So if you want to trade for pennies on the dollar, for your cost of goods, for real retail dollars, Trade Bank is something that you should look into for sure. Are you ready for the photo? He's also a dad joke aficionado, Mr. Ed Fox. He's the one who records them for us.
Okay.
So here we go. Joke number 1.
Let's do it.
My friend asked me what's the best thing about Switzerland. I said, I don't know anything about Switzerland, but its flag's a big plus.
Oh, gee.
It's a big plus.
You got to kind of have a little knowledge on that one to get it. I like that.
because it looks like a big plus sign.
Yeah, I'm thinking about my little girls. They'd be like, "What? What are you talking about?" Okay.
Yeah, they might get a little thrown off by it.
But that's the essence of a dad joke, right?
Yes. And the challenge isn't really a challenge. We just kind of react.
We just play them and go. Yeah. So all right, I like that one.
Okay, it wasn't a bad one. Here we go. Number 2.
I was recently diagnosed with colour blindness. It came out of the green.
That's good. Okay.
That wasn't bad. Number 3.
Oh wait. Does he make these up or he finds them?
If you meet him in person, he wears a tag that says "Ask me a dad joke." He'll pull one right out.
He's got them.
He's got them right at the front of his head.
Yeah.
Front of his mind. Top of his mind. Gosh, mixing my stuff and words. Number 3. Here we go.
Speaking of green, it's my favourite colour. I like it better than blue and yellow combined.
Green is blue and yellow combined.
For the artists out there.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And then we're going to do number 4. Here we go.
Man, you see all these people inventing things all the time? Well, I just invented a new word. Yeah, plagiarism.
That takes a little bit of thinking to get that one.
Yeah. With the internet these days, plagiarism's easy to find. Hard to find, easy to find.
Especially with the AI, Chat GPT and all that stuff.
Yeah,
my gosh, it's almost the differentiation right now. If you want to get attention on an email, put "not generated by AI" in the subject line. It'll probably get it open.
There you go.
Number 5 and final one. Here we go.
Fun fact, Australia's biggest export is boomerangs. Turns out, it's also their biggest import.
Yeah, I saw that one coming. It's like either one of those is the punchline right there. It's the first half. I was like, yeah, that was good.
That's not bad, right?
And then I was like, oh, there's more. That's awesome.
Well, there you go. There's the Dad Joke Challenge brought to you by Trade Bank of Nashville. All the details are in the description. If you're interested, make sure you reach out. I mean, just to have a cup of coffee with Ed Fox is worth the time spent. So reach out to him. He's vastly entertaining. He's a wealth of knowledge and just an all-around good guy. So check him out, tradebankofnashville.com. All those details are in the description. And off we go, Mr. Josh.
And I will tell Ed, don't ever let the haters bring you down with your dad jokes.
Oh, he doesn't let those get to
Oh,
him.
good. Because, man,
he's been around the block a few times.
Make the world a funnier place.
Yeah, might as well.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys are on TikTok. They sit on a dock. Have you seen them? It's I think it's called TikTok, I want to say. And they just decided to sit on a dock on a lake, and they're in various locations on docks. I don't know why. Mm-hmm. And they just tell each other these cringy dad jokes. And, they really try to hold a straight face, but every now and then they break.
Okay, now I know who you're talking about. I didn't know their names, but I've definitely seen those where they just sit there, tell the jokes, and yes, good stuff.
And they're holding big cups of coffee.
Yeah.
Right? And it's amazing because they've got, I think, hundreds of thousands of followers, if not millions.
It's great. We need it. Need more of it.
We really do. We really do. And especially somebody in your position doing what you do on a weekly basis, monthly basis, yearly basis, it's not easy being a pastor, man.
Well,
I don't envy you.
Well, you don't need to. That's good. No, I appreciate you saying that, but it's just like, we all have good seasons, bad seasons in the things that we do. Ministry is a calling for sure. And so I just always encourage people, man, you better know that you know. In fact, I have a friend who his advice to others, if they say, well, I feel called to be a pastor, but do you feel you can do anything else?
Right. Are you really sure?
There. Yes.
Yeah. Because, there's another option where you can go down a razor blade, water slide full of razor blades into a pool of alcohol. Uh-huh. That might be less painful.
Well, and there are times though when I'll say, man, thank you, God, this is the best thing I could ever do. Thank you. And then there are other times when it's like, Lord,
what did you get me into?
Yeah, like you called me to this, and I feel really rough right now.
Because it's so much more. It's almost like spiritual psychiatrist in a way. Mm-hmm. Which is just it's a tremendous amount of I don't think humans were meant to be antennas like that. I've always told people Jesus kind of put the model of the human relational, model together. We can only handle up to 12 people. right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's a challenge. There's an emotional impact that
Totally.
I will say when I got into this. I've been in full-time ministry for 20 years.
Yeah.
10 years in the lead pastor role of a church, and there were things that in the first few years, I know I was just completely unprepared for the
Right.
emotional toll of it. When you're hearing people's stories, what they're going through, what's going on in people's homes, and things that they have a tendency, they share with the pastor, and you want to help, and you realize, man, we're just we're messed up people.
Yeah. So you started 30 years ago.
20 years ago.
20 years ago.
20
I'm
years
sorry.
ago. Yes.
So you were in your 20s, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was in my late 20s when I got into full-time ministry.
But not in a lead pastor capacity.
No, so I started off in youth ministry in
Right.
2003 and did that until 2013.
Okay.
Yeah, and then so 10 years in the lead pastor role.
So in your 30s is when you got into it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
At that time of life, as you well know now, being I would assume in your 40s,
Yes.
late 40s.
I'm 46 years old. I'm not
Okay.
afraid to say it.
You're not much younger than I am. It does take, I would have to imagine, a couple of laps around the block of life to handle a role like that.
Mm.
Am I wrong, or it's because I've seen lead pastors who are in their mid-20s
Yeah.
that are trying to take on and counsel people in their 40s and 50s. I'm like, dude, you're still scooting around the couch, man. I mean, you barely put your diapers on
Mm-hmm.
with marriage and life in general.
Yeah, I will say, in those early years, I probably would have balked a little bit when you said that, because we all want to feel like we know what we're doing,
Yeah.
and that we can help people and whatever it may be. And if I were to go back even just 10 years and just talk to myself in the beginning, I would try to encourage myself and say, listen, it's okay to not know what you don't know.
Right.
You don't have to put up a front like you do know, and you're going to learn a lot along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually the best thing for you, because I think in a lot of things that we do, whether it's in business or our families, whatever, we want to put up the facade like we got it all under control.
Right.
We know exactly what we're doing, and we put that out there. And when really life is all about learning along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's some things I really had to go through. I really had to get punched in the face on a couple things to kind of learn that lesson.
Of course.
And that made me better. I have a friend who's also in ministry. He's almost 60, but I remember I used to say to him, hey, when I was younger, hey, when did people stop patting you on the head and going, you're going to get there. He's like, hey man, you got plenty of time. You're going to get there. Don't worry about it.
That's how he responded
Yeah,
to the question asking about exactly that thing.
Yes.
That's
So it was
funny.
fun.
So getting into it, you felt a calling. Was there anything that you did prior to that?
Yeah. So I grew up. So we're, here we are in Middle Tennessee. I grew up on the south side of Chicago in a little town called Thornton.
Yeah.
And when I was growing up, I always wanted to be a baseball player. My family's into sports. My dad was a professional basketball player in Europe for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And my older brother, Jason, who's 11 months older than me, my younger brother, Justin, we were baseball players. We were all within a 3-year period of each other. So that was like my dream of wanting to do that. So played all through high school. And the three of us were lucky enough to go and play baseball at Ole Miss together,
Right.
University of Mississippi. And that was kind of what I wanted to do. And my brothers were lucky enough, and they were good enough to be able to go on. Jason played for Anaheim Angels in the minor league system. Justin played for Kansas City Royals, made it up to the big league level as a pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
I got called into ministry, and I wanted to do the baseball thing, but it just, God had different things in store, and so there's a whole long story that goes along with that calling that happened.
Yeah.
And I'll leave that up to you if you want to get into any of it. But
Senior pastor at New Hope Community Church, Brentwood, Tennessee. Is that where you started and worked your way up?
So my first 3 years, I got called into youth ministry in Chicago area,
Okay.
a little church called King's Community Church. And so interesting little story. I was working I lived in Franklin, Kentucky. I was trying to do a little music thing.
Mm-hmm.
and hoping that would get off the ground. And I had a job working for a radio station, and I got called into the office, and they let me go.
Yeah, what do you know?
Yeah, and I called my wife, and I said, I think I just got fired. and she's like, well, what are we going to do? It's a small town. What job are you going to do? And so that night I got home, we walked around the block. My wife's pregnant with our first child, and we just prayed, and we said, okay, God, whatever it is that you have for us, like, we'll do it.
Yeah.
Just show us what it is. And the next morning, literally, my mom called, and there's a church I grew up in, and she said, hey, our pastor knows you're down there doing the music thing, and you're really, but would you ever consider moving up here and becoming our youth pastor? And this is the morning after we had just prayed and said, okay, God, what's next? Like, what is it? What are we supposed to do?
It just out of nowhere.
Yeah. And I said, so then I said, well, let him call me. And he called me, and we talked, and I said, well, I've never even really written a message to speak to young people. Now, this is funny. People go, what was your degree in? I was a history major.
That's good enough though.
Yeah.
That fits.
Was I qualified? I don't know, but I mean, it was definitely a God thing that all worked out. And went up there and did that for 3 years. And after those 3 years, I still felt there was another place I was supposed to be.
Right.
And my wife was pregnant with our second child, and I saw this youth position open up in Brentwood, Tennessee, which in the ministry world, we don't post jobs in Middle Tennessee that much because lots of people want to move to Middle Tennessee. It's usually a pretty tight-knit circle.
Is it easier here?
Easier to do what?
To be in a church. I mean, dare I say the church business? So it is the buckle of the Bible Belt.
Let me answer this way. I actually think, and I could be wrong about this, but any pastors who are listening, I think this area of the country of Nashville, Tennessee, is one of the hardest areas of ministry to work in a church. I think this is a dirty word in church. It shouldn't be. Competition.
Yeah.
Is off the charts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And in fact, I will listen to, I'll go to conferences, I'll go to all the, and there'll be all the latest, here's the things you can do. And I'll go, it doesn't apply to the Nashville context.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a much bigger challenge than any other place I've been.
Now, I've been a part of men's groups in the past. And if you were to say that the church industry around this area is a business, you were kind of frowned upon.
Mm.
But it's like, that's what it is, guys. Without money coming through the doors, the building shuts down. That's the reality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I don't know why you're getting upset about this. That's what it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It is what it is.
And there's a you could throw a baseball and hit a church.
Yeah.
And all around this area. And so there's a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And again, as I said, that competition thing is a dirty word. I definitely go out of my way to want to work with other pastors, talk with other pastors, have pastors come on. That's why I started my podcast.
Right.
Is to reach out to other pastors and other people in ministry and say, let's talk. Like we're same team. I have no competition with you. Let's be friends. Let's help each other. Let's if there's people in the area that your church might be a better fit for, or than mine might be, whatever it may be, let's not make any bones about it. Let's work together and help people.
There is that element, of course. A rising tide lifts all ships. Mm. But when there still is that human element, that primal competitive urge that comes out of us. That if we've got somebody who's quote church shopping, mm-hmm. Oh man, game on. I know a lot of other podcast companies and a lot of other voiceover people. I know my capabilities. I champion other people. I champion other companies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But when it comes down, I find somebody that's looking for a podcast. It's, hey, the claws come out, man. I mean, that's just, am I wrong?
No, I think you're right. And, most times if I go to a pastor conference or you're just meeting someone new for the first time who's in ministry, the first question is, how big is your church?
Yeah.
How many people, how many square feet you got? It's a comparing game, and yet we're the
measuring tape.
And yet we're the very ones who preach that it shouldn't be envy, it shouldn't be comparing, it shouldn't be any of those things.
It's funny that you mentioned that because, I mean, a lot of people that go to church probably have no idea that those things are discussed at conventions. But I mean, it just goes to show you how much, I mean, there's nothing, not that I'm saying or taking away the benevolence of what everyone does. I mean, it does serve a spiritual purpose for sure. And there are varying ways to do it. Some people go to church because they want to be seen. It's a part of the community. That's how they plug in. Mm-hmm. There are people that truly want to have that spiritual experience, but the conundrum I would have to imagine is that expectation of getting into a community of believers that are so aware of their own sin. And then when the humanity gets inevitably revealed, the letdown that happens, Yeah. It's like, I had a conversation with a pastor over at the Bridge, a great guy, Craig, why can't I remember his last name? Great guy, Pastor Craig. I think he's the executive pastor over there. And I said, why don't you just come out and say, look, at the Bridge, we will let you down. Because, I mean, every church does. Mm-hmm. Just be upfront about it. Isn't that a great slogan? We will let you down.
We will let you down.
Yeah. Okay, it's tongue in cheek, but it's true.
Yeah. Funny story about that.
Set the expectation early.
There's a little Chinese restaurant by my house. It's called Number One Chinese. Mm-hmm. And I talk about dad jokes. I always joke with my daughters and say, I'm going to open up a Chinese place called Number 3 Chinese.
Because you don't want to be number 2.
At least we're honest.
Right. And that's
transparency.
That's marketing, man. That's the law of candor.
Yeah.
And the 22 immutable laws of marketing. I believe it's called, I don't know what number it is, but it's the law of candor. Mm-hmm. And they talk about back in the 80s, the battle between Avis and Budget, the rental car company.
Yeah.
It wasn't Budget, it was Hertz. That's right. Hertz had the number 1 position. Avis was a distant second. And Avis's approach was, "Hey, we may not be the number 1, but we try harder."
Yeah,
well, that was their slogan.
It's a good one. Yeah. And there's a challenge in that where, I've been to going to the conferences thing. I've been to some before where the advice that you're given is never let them see you sweat. Never let them see you cry. Never show who you really are as a pastor. You got the answers. You got, you're the one who spends time in the Word. You're the one who's researching and studying. You got your life figured out. Mm-hmm. And so there's that mindset. And then there's this other mindset, which honestly, over the years, when we go back to learning things, getting punched in the face a few times, I've taken more the mindset of trying to be as transparent as I can.
And that's going to endear you.
And, I'm married 23 years to my wife, Sarah. I've got 4 kids. I got a son in college. I got one who's about to graduate high school. I got 2 daughters.
When were you married? What month?
August 2000.
August 2000. So we're at September 2001.
Oh, there you go. Okay. So,
we're a year behind you.
And so life happens. And even, I do spend time in the Lord, and I do work hard with my relationship with Jesus. And in that, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm not going to be perfect. And I'm not going to go up on the stage and pretend that I am.
Right.
But that is a challenge because that flesh thing gets involved, and you want people with your flesh to think that you do have it figured out. So it is a balance to walk. Maybe balance isn't the right word, but it is a difficult thing to go through.
It totally is. Like any other business, from a CEO, I mean, you're not dealing with, the business of dealing with our sin in any other business.
Yeah.
But you are pretty much the CEO of your church.
Yeah. And
that has to kind of play into it. But as long as I think the most vulnerable CEOs are the most endeared to their team. Mm-hmm. And then, their customers and things of that nature. Your customer being your parishioners, the people that attend. Your team being the ones that help you get the job done. That has to kind of play into things. I mean, that's your attitude certainly is very endearing. Mm-hmm. And it's refreshing because what got me out of my church, and I guess what was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, was after the Sandy Hook shootings. Mm-hmm. That was impactful to me and my family because we're from that area. We grew up literally 10 minutes from Sandy Hook, Newtown. There were school-age kids that were the same age as our kids. Mm-hmm. And my wife was very intuitive. We were working here. I was at the radio station working for Mix 92.9 and Jack, and I was filling in for somebody. It was around Christmas time. And it was Michael Del Giorno. I was listening to another radio station while working in the radio station where I was working. And he broke the news and talked about everything that happened. And it was like a punch to the gut.
Mm-hmm.
It was on two fronts. It was so familiar. And then I met with my wife and my son and my newborn daughter, or she was about to be born. I think either way, it was kind of just hitting close to home because we had a daughter that was in kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
And we go to lunch, and I kind of glanced down at my phone, and the body count had been updated. And I was like, you could see it on my face. And she just looked at me. She goes, "How many?"
Mm-hmm.
I go, 22. And she just, she's so sensitive. Tears just started coming down her face. And she says, "I just feel like I know one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I know one of them. I'm connected somehow." And then she talked to somebody. I got back to the radio station. She calls me up in hysterics. Turns out her brother's ex-girlfriend's niece was one of the victims.
Oh,
And it was somebody who was very close to our family.
this is devastating.
Yeah. So on three fronts, we were kind of affected by that whole thing.
Yeah.
And so it happened on a Friday. The Bridge at the time was doing their Gift for Christ, which is basically translation. We want money to, put in for next year. And they were looking to buy their own property and a building and so on and so forth. And the pastor was in his late 20s at the time. He went on stage like it didn't even happen. I don't think he even acknowledged it.
Mm.
And people were in the congregation that had never been there. Like they were just looking for solace, peace about what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And they went on and sang Joy to the World. And like it was completely tone deaf. And I was like, you've got it. It's okay if you get up there and say, "Guys, I got to put everything that we thought we were going to do this weekend on pause."
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't know what to say about what happened. I would have appreciated that. I don't care if it's 5 minutes long. If you just leveled with us and say, "You know what? I'm barely 30. I'm still trying to process this.
Yeah.
I don't know how to handle this, but all I know is this, is that, in the end, all tears will be wiped. All sorrow will go away, and we're going to be with Christ." That's all you got to hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's what I'm holding on to. I don't know how to process this as your pastor. And I hope you're okay with that.
Yeah.
If you were to have a message like that, I'd be like, "Dude, awesome. That's real."
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah. And
Get Joy to the World. Give us your money. That's all I heard. And everybody else that was there, that I knew people that never went to church or they were just completely turned away from the whole notion of church.
yeah.
And that's what they heard.
Yeah. And that's tough, right? I mean, sometimes, here's what I'd say, Jim, like you talk for a living, I talk for a living.
Mm-hmm.
And my father-in-law used to say this: if you talk for a living, you're inevitably not going to say the right thing or not say what
Sure.
you should have said or whatever, and these mistakes and things happen. And, without knowing that situation specifically, and I don't know the pastor as well either.
Right.
I mean, we don't know. It could be of a thing where just being so locked into a space of being in a different direction that it just was just missed,
Right.
And that's hard.
I don't blame the pastor. I blame it on his inexperience,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, guys, and all the actual team, the pastoral team were young, even the elders that I guess were supposed to be guiding them. I'm not sure if they actually did in this situation,
Yeah.
but it was a very young team. And it's like, it screamed obvious at that point.
Yeah. And I think that's a key thing. One thing that I mentioned, in fact, I mentioned this in a message a few weeks ago, as the pastor of the church, I let people know, I will let you down.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen. I'm going to say something or not say something. And without even knowing you were going to go into that,
Right.
that will upset you. But what you need to know is I'm here and let me know.
Yeah.
And we can talk. And we can go through these things, and sometimes people take me up on that. Other times, they step out and they might get upset, whatever it may be. But I will say even me sharing that, I probably wasn't saying something like that 10 years ago.
Right.
So it's just something that whoever, and I don't even know who the pastor was.
Right.
But I guess the thing we could be just praying is that the experience gained since that time has brought them to a place to learn from it.
The actions speak louder than words in that situation, because even, of conversations I've had since with other people that are still there, they've told me that, he always said that it was going to be his forever home. He was going to grow old there and, lead and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden he got a calling out of Texas at this, church that's got 15, 20,000 people attending every weekend. And God called him there, amazingly enough. Even his daughter came to him and said, I keep on, she was 5 or 6 years old. He would tell the story apparently and tell everybody that she just said that I just keep on seeing us in Texas and Houston and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, she's picking up on the conversations you and your wife are having. What do you think? Come on, man.
Yeah.
Dude, it's like, it's a cult of personality at this point. And stop trying to sell it as something else. You're going for the big bucks. I'm sorry. That's the way it looks. That's how it comes off. We know you're probably making $250,000 going down there as the lead pastor of a church that size. That's massive.
Yeah.
That's massive.
Well, and the church you're speaking of is not a small church either by any stretch,
So you know who I'm probably talking about.
Well, you mentioned the name of the church, so I never met the specific pastor.
Yeah.
But I know who you're talking about, because I remember when they were looking for a new pastor a few years ago, and so I'm putting timelines together in my head. But yeah, and that is, again, you were talking about the flesh side of things. I mean, listen. I
don't begrudge the guy for going for advancing his career.
Yeah.
But don't paint it as something that it's not. All right, don't pee on my leg. It's telling me it's raining.
Well, there is a tendency to spiritualize the things that are more flesh things, right? If I can put it behind a spiritual lens, then I can explain anything away.
Yeah, and I could attest. I heard firsthand the team that was left were hurt. They're like, well, what happened to everything you said? Well, it's just this is where I'm going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Message received.
Yeah, so it's interesting. New Hope is a smaller church where we'll go between probably about 350 people if you had them all there together.
Right.
So it's a different situation in that we are an elder-driven church, an elder-led church, but there is not. In fact, some of these churches probably have more staff than we have people in some of these places. But
they're huge.
And so, and we're surrounded by just some monster churches. And there is
it's Six Flags Over Jesus up there, man.
With 3 or 4 of them that are right around there.
Yeah.
And that, that's where I learned really quick, okay, this ain't about competition, because that's like, the Yankees against the Tampa Devil Race when it comes to available, finances and availability and people and all that kind of stuff. So how about, let's just take our eyes off that and just try to focus and be the best church that we can to the community here. With your story, I can think of several times that, we've had things planned and in place and then something as far as planned, I mean like a message and how we were going to do worship. And then something horrible happened on a Friday or a Saturday. We usually have everything done for our church and planned by Thursday.
Right.
So like today, everything's done in place for Sunday. And so it's kind of like a ship that's heading in a direction.
Right.
And here's the plan that's going to be executed. And then, if a disaster or something happens, you have to pivot.
You got to pivot. Yeah, I get it.
Now, a New Hope like us, our elders and our leadership, just kind of look to me and my role and expect me to be able to pivot if I'm going to do those things and follow God's lead. And so the only thing, again, without being there, the only thing I can see is if it's a large church, the moving parts to pivot like that. Yeah. I remember some friends who interviewed for a large church where everything is scripted. Yeah. Everything is handed to you to say, and you say this, you don't get off the script. And not making excuses, but who knows? Maybe there was something to that. I don't know.
I guess that's, when you get that kind of size, you have to meet an expectation of the masses. They're coming and it's, not different to let's say, for example, what Marvel did over the past, 15 years. They set an expectation beginning with Iron Man and all the movies that came out. They had an expectation from the audience to what was the new pivot? What was the wow factor? What was the twist?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was, so when you set that kind of an expectation and you start getting successful with it, you don't want to deviate.
Mm-hmm.
That does make sense. That's how you run a successful business. Meet the expectations. If McDonald's came out and started selling lobster rolls, it would be kind of weird as their main product. Oh, we're jettisoning hamburgers. We're going to go with lobster rolls. Well, that's, you're kind of trashing the expectation at that point. So,
and to go back to one blessing that I have, my wife is really good about being perceptive of what you're talking about. Like recent things going on in Israel and war and things of that nature, where my wife will say, hey, I'm supposed to be doing this announcement thing. I'm going to pray over all that stuff.
Right.
We don't have that plan. I think we should do that. And it just kind of puts a light bulb on for me to go, yes, we need to be praying over that. We need to dedicate time in the service to pray for that specific situation.
Right.
And if a horrible thing happens like Sandy Hook, or a horrible thing happens that's in the news, that to have people who you trust, who say, we need to say something, we need to pray, we need to whatever, that is so invaluable. And then for me in my role as a pastor, to not go, well, I don't feel that call, but to go, okay, I need to step back and go, why did you bring that to me? Mm-hmm. And yes, we need to do that. Now, there's other times where I'll have people who will bring something up that's not a tragedy, but it's in their eyes something that's
big,
Yeah. And then you really have to be more aware of what things need attention and what things don't.
You are in a catch-22 situation, probably at any given moment of your life when you're in your position, man.
Yeah. And you mentioned a thing earlier about CEOs, and I'll throw you this little tidbit. Maybe we can go down this road.
Sure.
Because you might ask, what's the difference between ministry and what's the difference between being the CEO of a business or whatever? So if you're in a lead pastor role, a good friend of mine, Dr. Charles McGowan, who he's retired now, but he was the senior pastor at Christ Presbyterian, which it's in Nashville. It's across from Harpeth Hills Golf Course. Anybody who's local would know what it is. CPA is one of the big schools, private schools in the area, of which Charles was one of the instrumental people in blowing that up. Anyway, he said, blowing it up in a good way, he says to me all the time, the difference between pastoral ministry and being a CEO of a company is this. If you were to get rid of your number two person in a big Fortune 500 company, like say the CEO of Coca-Cola fires his number two guy tomorrow, people are still going to drink Coke.
Right.
If you do that, everyone has a constituency. People who follow this leader, people who like this person who's on staff, people who, whatever it may be, every decision you make in a pastoral position is fallout.
Right.
And so people then vote with many different ways
their attendance
when it comes to ministry and things of that nature. And so that's one challenge, but again, we're in a good season now, so I'm thankful for it.
Yeah, and the other aspect of it was, putting forth at the time what they called the gift for Christ, which was to help them get a building, which now they do have, and also plant other churches. And I'm going, where are we We're planting it in Colombia. Okay. Aren't we kind of saturated here? I mean, do we really need another church? Why don't we go to, where are they lacking? I mean, aren't they lacking up in Wisconsin, where there's a lot of non-believers? I know where I came from, Catholicism seems to be prevalent, but you guys disagree and you don't think that's the right message. Why don't we plant one up in Danbury, Connecticut? They could use the message. I know that this would resonate well up there, but why are we, it's like an echo chamber down here, right? And I just never understood it. Maybe I was naive, and but it always just kind of fed to me that, it just supports the local infrastructure of the business of church. And it's not something to get upset about, because without money you can't operate. right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you go completely by faith. You know, you're not advertising, you're not preaching to people. It is truly an act of God that these things are coming in.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about, there can be a pressure for whether it comes from business leaders or whatever it may be, for everyone to think that there's a line out there, if you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah.
And I've heard that be applied to churches, and there had been a big movement to make churches and pastors more like CEOs and more like business decisions and marketing and how you're doing everything. And so you need to be growing, you need to be advancing, you need to be multiplying your locations, you need to be doing all these things. And if you're not doing those things, then we need to relook at this and reevaluate. And maybe we need to get somebody in here who does, so that we are increasing our budgets and we are increasing the amount of money and increasing the amount of people. And that just, to me, does a real disservice to the churches that, a church of 50 people is just as valuable to the kingdom of God than a church of 6,000 people.
Right.
And
I'd say even more valuable.
And it does a real disservice to those pastors and those ministry leaders who are doing God's work and working with those 50 that, and they're in the trenches with them, and they're spending time with them, and they are preaching the word and doing all that they can. And just because they don't have a multi-million-dollar budget, and just because they're not planting a new church down the street or taking over somebody else's church, whatever, and we can go into that. But, so I get it, because it's always fun. I go back to the conferencing. It's always fun to say, hey, we planted a church in this area over here, and we have multiple locations now. We have all these things going on. It's fun to impress people, but that's not what we're always called to do.
Do we think that this is what Jesus intended?
Do I think it's what he intended?
Yeah.
I think there's probably a lot of times when we miss the mark.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
when
We're
it comes
human.
to that. Uh-huh.
And that's the other thing that, my learning aspect from what happened in, years ago and all this, when I kind of stopped going. There was a myriad of reasons I stopped going. That was one of them, but I also had a shift in my life with career and things of that nature, which took up a lot more of my time.
Mm-hmm.
And then, people in the church. I was a unevenly yoked person. I was the dad who brought the kids. My wife was like, I've been there, done that. Went through it from, grade school and high school.
Mm-hmm.
You do what you think you know what you want to do, but I don't want to step foot in that place.
Yeah.
I know. And, if you need to find out what I know, I guess you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And when it all happened, not that she ever said, I told you so, but it was like, that was implied,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of knew this was going to happen. I get it. And then, afterwards, we had made some pretty good inroads and relationships with people in the church. One of them being the pastor's mom, who loved my kids. And I said, well, I can't really go and bring them every Sunday, because sometimes Sundays I got to work now. And this thing is really taking up my time. It's really a challenging season in my life on top of everything else I'm dealing with. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to be there she told my wife I'm going to be here I'm going to show every Wednesday I'll be here, and we're going to talk, we're going to play with the kids and blah, blah, blah. One Wednesday, and then crickets.
Mm.
That was it.
Yeah.
She disappeared.
So would you say, I don't know
like,
what
it was
you
like one after, and it was kind of interesting, because it was God saying, you don't need them.
Mm.
You need me. Stop depending on my people. They're going to let you down.
Well, I would push back a little bit on that, Jim. I think being hurt and having moments like that happen a lot.
Yeah.
And
it happens. This is a very lonely area.
Yeah. And I think, I grew up in the church. My parents have been worship pastors for longer than I've been alive. Mm. I'd seen growing up multiple times where they were hurt. There's one occasion that I remember we showed up for church and their entire worship team was gone because another pastor had come in and told them that God told them that worship team was supposed to be their worship team, and they all left and went somewhere else.
Oh
And
my gosh, he came in and recruited them?
Yeah. And I remember another time where a youth pastor that I had he stepped down because God was calling him to start another church. And that church, by the way, will be meeting down the street next week. And so you're all welcome to come here and leave this church,
Wow.
And
that's brutal.
had, other things where even in the past, over the past 15 years, where I could just tell you stories of just things for me, even in my position, that have hurt so much that it was hard to even walk into the doors of the church that I'm the pastor of.
Yeah.
And so these things happen.
Oh yeah.
And the thing that I would say is that you said it, people will hurt you, but I would encourage you, and I would encourage anyone who has experienced that it doesn't have to be the end. There is a church out there. There is a pastor out there. There is someone that I believe God can use in your life to kind of bring healing to that situation. But that being said, it doesn't mean that hurt would never happen again. Mm-hmm. I mean, people are people. I mean, we can go out to the restaurant down the street. You and I can go out for coffee after this and get mad at somebody who treats us wrong.
Sure.
I mean, it's gonna happen. And we think to ourselves, well, that shouldn't happen in the church. But my question would be, why do you think that?
I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
No, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I think I'm of the mindset that fallibility is going to run amok no matter where you go. Mm-hmm. We're all human at the end of the day. I've always said, but in a church, we're all intensely aware of our sin. Mm-hmm. That's the difference.
Yeah.
That's always been the difference to me.
Yeah. And everyone handles that different.
Sure.
Just like with, I have 4 kids, mm-hmm. and when one of them is making a mistake or one of them says something they shouldn't say or whatever, they each respond differently. Yeah. And some of it's healthy, some of it's unhealthy. Yeah. And I think that happens in the church as well. But I would, say, to go along with you, like when those things happen, it is, you sometimes need a season to step back. Yeah. And to say, I need to get to a place of health. But I will say, for me, I'm so blessed by our church community. Like those very things that I talked about, things that were hurtful and whatever. Had I walked away, the thing that always kept me coming back was that I have relationships and friendships with people in that church that are so deep that for me, God uses them in my life to hold me up. Right. And I'm thankful for that. So yeah, and I do believe that those
was
people
that at the
are out
time
there.
though.
So yeah, I mean,
what if you didn't have them?
Yeah. I think that's.
You ever put yourself in that kind of a scenario? It was like, well, what if I didn't have that? Mm-hmm. Would I've had the resolve to still stick it out? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, and I think that is tough.
Yeah.
Right. And
because literally after all that happened, we were pretty much on our own. It was my wife at home with the kids. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not placing blame anywhere. It happened. Mm-hmm. I think it actually strengthened us. I know it did.
So what do you
think? Made us more cynical?
Yeah.
Probably. Hard-hearted? Maybe. Mm-hmm. But it made you, what do they say, as staunch as serpents and as peaceful as doves? I can't remember what the passage is, but
yeah.
You know what I mean? It's my wife's gift for discernment has been quite sharpened. Mm-hmm. She knows if somebody comes into our life right off the bat, what kind of intentions they have. Mm-hmm. If they're pure, if they're misguided, if there's something off, she knows instantly. And I'm kind of the same way. Something's off.
Yeah.
You smell it. And that comes with experience and wisdom in life. Going around the block a few times.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
So
what would you say to me, like if you had that opportunity and say, I was the guy, yeah. I missed it. Did you ever have that chance to just share and say?
I did.
Yeah.
And I actually invited him to the house. He didn't want to come. And I said, dude, what do you think we're going to do? Yell at you or beat you up? Well, I just don't feel safe. You don't feel safe? What do you think we're going to do to you?
Mm-hmm.
I said, my wife is a part of this too. You know her. You know the situation. I confide in you as my pastor. And you're telling me you don't want, you fear for your safety?
Mm-hmm.
Then maybe we just don't need to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case. Well, I'd rather okay, you want me to come to your turf. Fine. So I did.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation. I said, the way you handled this was awful. And you need to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
I said, if I did anything out of line, I would expect to hear it. That's called being a man.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And maybe you're not equipped to do this job because you're not treating this like a man. Okay. You need to hear the hard truths. And I know you hear a lot of them. But, this is pretty egregious in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I said, this is just something that I got to get off my chest.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him.
Did you feel the response was it?
It was kind of along the lines, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. That's how it was received, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So where did you go from there?
Nowhere. I had men's groups that I depended on who, again, it was a relationship that I met through the church. And this gentleman up until 2022, he passed. Great guy. I mean, the Bible was almost like an internal organ, an appendage off of his body. He knew it that well. And he was my guy for years. Every Friday we'd meet at the Waffle House and talk about life, talk about what was going on.
Yeah.
And dive into different
and so
chapters.
that was like a community that you were able to build after you were?
Just he and I.
Yeah.
It was a men's group and it kind of dwindled down to just he and I after a while. And I think he just felt obligated to me. And I just kept on showing up.
Yeah.
And my business partner now, he has that purpose for me as well. He's very well vocal and articulate when it comes to biblical teachings and stuff like that. And if I have questions, I mean, my thing is even apologetics is a big gifting in my life. For somebody who's a skeptic, if they're, they got questions, I can kind of address it, especially on a surface level, and at least hopefully get them to the next level of curiosity.
Yeah, that's great.
Like me, like how my story was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A 1 Peter 3:15 guy, which is always be prepared to give a defense of your faith for sure.
But I mean, it's I don't think social media has helped in the winning people for God at all.
Well, what has social media helped much of at all? I mean, I know marketing, building brands, and I definitely know that side of it for sure. But
political and religious conversations, they're just utterly pointless.
Right. It can get your name out there. It can get that recognition and all that stuff. But as far as what it does to people from an emotional standpoint, from a competition standpoint, from a attention deficit standpoint, definitely a lot of negative stuff for sure. But
if you look at it that way, you can certainly populate your feeds with a lot of positive, marinating your mind in the right stuff. That's something that I do. I try to at least, but I mean, that's, I see constant, political conversations and comment threads that go on for pages and pages and pages. It's like, what do you guys, well, actually it's like, dude, what do you, just go to coffee, have a beer, do something. Yeah. Get it off of social media.
Yeah. It's much easier to operate in that world and do that. So,
and that's the thing is that nobody does that anymore. Do it face to face.
Yeah.
If you want to challenge my thoughts on God, then okay, let's meet somewhere. I'm not doing this on social media. That is my one line in the sand. We're not doing this on Facebook. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's pointless.
Yeah.
Okay. If you've got the moxie and the keyboard courage, let's see it in person. Because that's what it is keyboard courage.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Right. My joke I always say is I'll type it out or I'll put it, on, but before I hit send, I'll just delete it. At least I felt like I sent it.
Yeah.
Just get that thought out there for sure.
Get it out and get it released. And it's almost like therapy.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I'm going to fire it off.
What's your
Josh,
problem?
What are you dealing with?
What am I dealing with?
What's keeping you up at night? What's the one thing? It's always something. What is your problem?
What is my problem?
Yeah. How big is the church, by the way?
I said about 300 people.
About 300 people?
300 people. And we're going into Christmas season right now. So you say, what is my problem? Well, there's a whole lot of plans and things that go into a Christmas season when it comes to church. We've been working on devotions and trying to get things. One of the things that we're really focused on is we want to help families.
Right.
We want families to feel like they have a partner and allies at their church. And so whether it's raising their kids in the Lord and where do we get devotions, how do we connect them more, we really have made that an area of focus for us. And so today they were working on putting these devotions together for Advent, which is right after Thanksgiving that goes through the Christmas season.
Right.
Kind of the time of preparation for Christmas and for Jesus. And so we say that's not a problem per se, but it takes time and effort to put that stuff together.
And coming at it with a different angle. There's always an element of differentiation, even in the church community, in this industry, if you will. I hate to be kind of that's what it is, but we go back to that. Finding that angle. I'm again going back to the whole "we will let you down" thing. I think that is a notion that somebody needs to grab on and run.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been saying it, so maybe the audience will get out there.
New Hope Church. We will let you down.
We will. Just give me some time, and
That's right.
It's going to happen.
Good news is that we're all redeemed.
Yeah. So we've been doing that, and really the Advent thing, the devotions, and the video, and we try to be accessible to people as much as we can. So this really kind of goes along with that. And so yeah, that again, it's not a problem per se, but it's definitely wanting to do the things that we can to help people, but we spread ourselves a little thin sometimes.
I mean, a church that size, I would imagine that you have to.
Yeah, and it can get tiring.
Yeah.
But if you can kind of work your schedule right, and you can kind of take some time for self-care as well, to step out of it and just take a breath, whatever, and get some energy, and you can figure that out. It takes time as you're doing the job to figure out when's the good times to step back and when to really lean in. You can kind of hold off some of those problems and the exhaustion of it.
So what's exhausting you in that? Just preparing for that season? Yeah. It's a big season to go into.
Yeah.
Right?
So, well, here's something you might find interesting in listeners and things. The seasons that you would think would be the most rewarding, Christmas and Easter and whatever they may be, those are the times where people are very nostalgic and very traditional in their thinking. You have memories, you have things about church, you have messages, you have songs, you have all these things that you go into that season looking forward to hearing. Expectations right. Of Christmas and Easter and all that.
We will let you down.
Right. So on one hand, as a pastor who puts these things together, it's awesome because this is why we exist. I mean, Jesus was born in the one season and we celebrate it, and this other season is, Easter is he died, but he rose again, and we celebrate that. But then everyone comes into it with their expectation, and hopefully you do it right. And so the other issue is those messages are kind of similar. Some will go into that and think, well, we need to do something so creative and so different, and then it's like in some other, and you miss the mark really bad, right? Where I've learned over time now in my season where it's like, it's okay to lean into that traditional. Yeah. It's okay to go, let's just celebrate the fact that we have these amazing stories of Jesus, and let's just tell the story the way the Bible intends, and we don't need the bells and whistles to do it.
You got guys like Greg Locke up in Mount Juliet, who's become like a lightning rod. Mm-hmm. And I remember meeting him in 2016, just before everything took off for him. Mm. What are your thoughts on what he's doing? Because he kind of intermingles everything, all the happenings in the world, politics, things like that, into the message. Yeah.
So I've never met him.
Right.
I know exactly who you're talking about just because of his social media presence and all those things that he did to do that.
Yeah.
And
truly a cult of personality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said you met him? Mm-hmm. So was he kind of like that?
He was very soft-spoken.
Very soft-spoken?
Like I would imagine he's in the radio business. When I was part of it in talk radio, a lot of the personalities had off-air personalities. And when the mic flipped on, they came on. It was a character. Howard Stern has talked about it. He says, it is a character. Dr. Laura Schlesinger was a character. Rush Limbaugh was a character. All these guys. Now, with some of these podcasters that are out there, I think a lot of them are off the air different, but yeah, when they're on, they're on.
Yeah.
You know, so I think there's an element of that happening too.
Yeah. And so for me, I've committed myself to say, I'm going to be the person that you see who's up there on the platform delivering messages, or if you're watching or listening to the podcast that I do, I'm committed to be that same exact person up there or on there that I am right here sitting with you. So when these microphones go off, you're not going to get a different Josh. You're not going to get anything like that.
Right.
So I can't comment on Greg Locke or other pastors, and I go out of my way not to comment on them, in the sense that I'm gonna preach and I'm gonna teach and I'm gonna be who I believe God has called me to be.
Right.
I will say that how they approach things. So you asked me specifically about him. That's not me, and it will never be me.
Right.
The podcast that I do, I actually had a guest who came on one time. He said, if you really want this thing to go off, to really explode, you need to
be divisive.
Yeah. You need to really say some hard things. You need to go after this particular audience. You need to go after whatever it may be. And that is true. That's how you explode, and that's how you do it. That's not why I do what I do.
Right.
So if my goal were to have the biggest podcast in the world, or my goal is to explode this church and win people in a way that is not me, then I'm already losing.
Right.
Now,
because it becomes more about you.
And then all that's going to do is feed my flesh, and that's when I say feed my flesh, that's going to feed my ego and all things that are about me. And so how I've just kind of approached that, and I've had people who come to me and say, you should preach about this, and you should. This is the hot button issue that needs to be talked about, and these are the things that you need to
Armchair
do.
quarterbacks,
and those are not the things that I feel God has called me to do.
Right.
And so if God's called me to preach to a church of 300 people, then those 300 people, and this is going to sound like I'm being cliche to you or to listeners,
right.
Those 300 people are going to get the best of what I can do and what God has called me to be for them as their pastor.
And you have to be okay with that.
But that's a struggle, Jim. Okay, there's a flesh side of that is a struggle.
Yeah.
Okay, that someone will go, well, Josh, so you're clearly not as successful because you don't. I'll tell you a funny story. Okay,
yeah.
We were golfing one time. I was with two guys from our church, and one of the guys I was with he's the best evangelist for our church that's out. I mean, this guy just talks to everybody about New Hope, and he's a friend of mine, and I'm so thankful for him. So he's proud of me that we're friends, and he tells everybody that you need to come to New Hope and come listen to Josh. So anyway, we're golfing, and we get paired with this fourth guy, and we get to about the 13th hole. So we're getting close to the end of the round, and my friend says to this guy we got paired with, "You need to come to our church because Josh is," and he says, he says these complimentary things about me as a pastor, and the guy goes, "Well, how big's the church?" And our friend, he says, his name's Dan. Dan says, well, we got like, what do you say? 300, 400 people, Josh? I was like, yeah, it's 300 people. He goes, well, my church is 6,000 people. So I don't think Josh is as good as our guy.
Wow. Is that what it takes?
And so, but that was the response. And so I'm a human being just like everyone else. Right. So your initial response to that is to bristle and to go, well, is that true? Is the size? Is the size of the church? Is that what determines
the size
how great
really
the
matter?
pastor is?
I mean, come on.
Yeah, right. That's a different question. But that's again, that's my ego right there, right?
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, here's what I'm blessed about is that New Hope is a church that is healthy, is strong. Those 300 people we have a wonderful church staff, and I'm not just blowing smoke. I mean, they really are awesome. I love every one of them. And what we do on a Sunday morning and what we're able to be to our people, the congregants and the people who visit the church is awesome.
You're able to connect with them better.
Yeah, definitely.
And even at 300, it's a stretch.
Yeah. And when you start taking this mindset that, because of numbers or whatever, that the grass is greener somewhere else. A friend of mine once said, you know why that grass is greener? Took a lot of fertilizer.
Yeah.
So, you know what fertilizer is.
Yeah.
So like,
bovine scatology.
Yes. Yeah. Stop looking over there, And
I
so
gotta say credit to Uncle Phil Valentine. He used to say that all the time.
Yeah. So anyway, but going back to your original thing, if that's something, here's what I'd say: if Greg Locke or if another pastor, you insert any name there, if they were to sit down and you're one-on-one and you're having coffee and they say 100% wholeheartedly they feel that God has called them to do what they're doing, and their goal in that is to lead people to Jesus, because that's what we're called to do: lead people to Jesus, not grow churches,
right?
But to lead people to Christ. And so if he were to sit down, and I've never met him, if he were to say that's why I do that. That's why during those political seasons I do that. That's why I would, and that was it. I'm good. I'm fine with that. And I would expect any one of my pastor friends, if my goal was to veer off that and not to lead people to Jesus, I would expect my friends to sit down with me and say, hey man,
there's got to be a conviction there.
You need to tighten up.
Yeah.
That's not what we're called to do.
Because I would imagine that there's a conviction even coming out here in this conversation, is that to the pastors who are in front of these massive congregations, mega churches, if you will, even the person we were talking about, an hour ago, if you're being told to preach against what is something you feel intrinsically right, if you feel like what is, well, that's not what we do, that's not who we are, you can't say that because it'll upset people. But if it's all of a sudden you feel God-led, no, this is what I want you to say, and they're telling you not to, that's a problem. Because that goes on.
Yeah.
That goes on.
Yeah, and I think, I would encourage any leader in the church to remember what you were called to in the first place.
Yeah.
And the calling in ministry is to bring people to Christ, to lead people to Christ, to draw people near to Christ. And you do that because this is what Paul says in Scripture, follow after me as I follow after Christ. Don't follow me because you just want to be with me. Follow me because I'm going to lead you straight to Jesus. That's my mission and goal, is to take you. But if you're called to me and I'm not taking you there, but I'm taking you somewhere else that maybe my ego is taking or whatever it may be, then I'm off the mark. Yeah. I was recently, Erwin Lutzer, who was the pastor of Moody Church in Chicago for many, many years. I was at a conference that he just led at Billy Graham's place called The Cove. And Erwin Lutzer said that if you ever find yourself getting off track, remember how you were originally called in the first place. Remember that Jesus called you to do something and what that calling looked like. And that will kind of refocus you back on what you should be doing in the first place. So that when you have those moments that happen and you're like, somebody wants me to say this or somebody wants, and it's off the mark, you can step back and go, okay, Lord, guide me.
Yeah, remind me.
What
are we doing here?
Mm-hmm.
Because I would imagine, I've always said that, I don't remember God saying or Jesus saying in the gospel, build buildings and invite them in.
Mm-hmm.
I remember him saying, go out, go out, go out, go out, go out.
Yeah. If we're not careful, the building itself can just become just a buffet that we just belly up to the buffet line and just get fat on learning and wisdom and knowledge, and then we don't apply it to anything that we're going to do outside of that building. I do believe with my whole heart that building is there to be a place where you can get built up and edified and worship and learn, but it's that worship is supposed to motivate you and give you energy as you go out into the world and do the things out in the world that you're supposed to be doing.
And the way charge their batteries.
Yeah, being a light for Christ and to take that out there, but not to just go and eat and eat and eat and build up calories and then you don't go out and exercise.
Right.
So, yeah.
A lot of people do that.
I'm one of them for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another guy that I listened to his podcast. His name is Brad Lee. and he has a podcast called Dropping Bombs.
Mm-hmm.
And he lives, he's got a part-time house out in Brentwood, lives mostly in Vegas. And he and I have had conversations about it on the podcast. I've been on his podcast. He's been on mine a few times. He recently had an episode where he had somebody who was articulate in doctrinal, scriptural expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And his big thing, Brad's big thing has always been, Jesus wasn't his name. It's Yeshua, and he says, that wherever that came from, it's wrong. We're calling him by the wrong name. That's his biggest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is he? What does that do to him that he thinks that we're calling him the wrong name?
I don't know. And that's when I think next time I have him on, I'm like, dude, what's the really at issue here? Okay. Do you believe in him or don't you? Okay. Because you believe that all roads lead to heaven too, which is it's not scriptural.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to believe that because it fits your worldview that even as bad as we can be, we're still going to make it. Nobody goes to hell.
Yeah.
Or nobody, gets cast aside or not allowed in heaven, whatever that looks like. I said, you do realize that Jesus is the one who spoke most about what happens if we don't.
Yeah.
Okay. He spoke most about it. And it's like his name, he's got, how many names does he have?
Mm-hmm.
I am.
Yeah.
Great counselor.
Well, and Yeshua itself, the name means salvation.
Right.
So he's right in the sense that, yes, he is Yeshua and he is salvation and he is the one and only way to God the Father. There's no other way but by him. He's the way, the truth, and the life.
Right.
And so, Brad, I've never met you as well either, but you're 100% right. Yeshua is salvation and he's the only way you'll get saved.
Right. My business partner, John, I sent him the episode. I said, he was on his way to China at the time. You need to listen to this. He's like, I couldn't even get halfway through it. I was getting so frustrated. I said, why? He says, because Brad was contradicting himself and the other guy was just doing a horrible job of trying to, bolster up. Well, he's like, there are so many different ways I would have gone about that. I said, well, maybe I need to set that up.
That would be, an entertaining podcast.
I think it would completely.
Yeah. Do it, man.
Yeah, I totally think I will.
Yeah.
At some point. I just got to get them all together.
It's fun.
So how people can find and follow you and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. So, well, first off, I'm going to tell you the church, New Hope Community Church. It's newhopechurchtn.org.
Got to pull up right here.
And we've got all of our stuff. Our team does a great job with the messages and live stream and all of that at New Hope Church TN. And then joshhuisman.com, where you can see the Josh Huisman podcast. We're available on YouTube, the Josh Huisman podcast. And of course, on all the different things, Apple and Spotify. And
how many episodes do you have out?
So we have the 24th episode drops on Monday. So nice. New episodes come out every Monday, and it's been fun, man. It's one of those things that I actually look forward to doing now.
Yeah.
People will come in, and you know this because you're a way longer veteran at it than I am, and they go, "What are we going to talk about for an hour?" It's like, that's my job.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I just want to make you comfortable. Come in here, and I look forward to talking to these guests and pastors and musicians, and it's
when
fun.
It comes to podcasting, it's all about primal curiosity and just being really interested in the other person. Here we are, we're a minute 12 or an hour 12 into this, and we can keep going. We got a lot to talk about. It just depends on how interesting of a person. I've listened to podcasts recently that just got off the ground. And literally the first episode is like, so what do you want to talk about? I'm like, no. No, you don't ask while you're recording, what do you want to do? You should have that planned.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, start getting your muscle memory.
Yeah. And one of the biggest compliments that I love, and I don't tell them this in advance, but I do, when we finish an hour of talking and I close it up and we go, new episodes every week, click and follow and they go, and we boom, the mics go off and they go, well, that went by fast.
Yeah.
That's the best compliment to me. It's like, if we go through that and it just it was just like that, man, I love it.
So, was this fun? Did it feel like it went by fast or is it like a slog?
No, this was awesome. I'll tell you what, was
it a challenging conversation or?
Yeah, you and I, we didn't talk a whole lot in advance. What we were going to talk about, so that was interesting that, I've been talking a lot about church hurt in our messages.
Interesting.
And so the fact that you shared a little bit about that, I think, Jim, that it's okay to talk about that.
Yeah.
And that the more real we can be, And the more, in a roundabout way, I don't know. I hope it makes you feel even better to walk away from that. You sat down with a pastor of a church and man, bring it.
Yeah.
That,
no one's ever been upset that I've told them this.
Yeah.
It's never been a thing.
Yeah.
But I share the story not to slam the church, but also to set expectations for people. Okay. Use me as a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
I went in bright-eyed and full of hope and expectations.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I was let down.
And
you need to temper your expectations. You're still dealing with humans at the end of the day.
And there are things I would say that there's someone out there right now. Maybe not someone. If I had a church of 6,000 people, maybe there'd be more people. But I have heard people. I know I've said things that then people left the church because of it. And they would go, man, that Josh Huisman guy, I try to tell him this and he just, and to them I would say, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But sometimes you're going to say something that you believe in that's not going to resonate with somebody. And I'm sorry, that's just the way 100%. I think.
And I would say,
I'm unwavering. This is what I think about this.
Yeah. And I would say I've done all I can to learn from it. Yeah. And I would say my prayers that they're at the church that they're supposed to be in. So these things happen, and so, but again, I'm happy we talked about it. It might not have been the most comfortable thing, but at the same time, man, I think it's the most helpful thing.
I honestly think God likes it when we disagree on things civilly, not, we're all of a sudden, well, you disagree and I'm writing you off. It's in a civil way. Hey, we can agree to disagree, because what are we really doing at the end of the day? All eyes are still on God.
Yeah.
We're simply just, discussing the variances, the virtues and nuances of the message. And there are a lot of them. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of ways to interpret it.
Yeah.
Nobody's got the end all be all answer. One thing that was always told to me by a guy that was in the car business who hired me, that was the shift in my life. He says, the thing about all these denominations? I said, what's that? They all think they're right. And I go, man, that is, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
You are not wrong.
Did you ever hear the story about the guy who got found on the deserted island? And they got there and they found him. There were 3 shacks. Mm-hmm. And they said, what's 3 shacks? And he says, well, that one's my house. And they said, well, what's that one? He goes, well, that was my first church, but I had a disagreement and I built that one.
I'll take my ball and take it over here. That's funny.
Yeah.
That's very funny. Well, there you go. All the details for Josh Huisman will be in the description on the links and everything like that. And of course, what'syourproblempodcast.com. The big, hairy, audacious goal, the BHAG, if you will, 10,000 average downloads. That's what we're going for. I'm not sure if a Middle Tennessee business podcast can do that, but why not? Let's put it out there. If we land, shoot for the moon, land on the roof, right? That's what we're kind of doing. So with that, check us out, share, subscribe, rate, review, what'syourproblempodcast.com. Josh, pleasure meeting you. And thanks for coming on.
Man, thank you so much for having me. It was great.